Today, let's take a look at a collection of European catalogs for one of my favorite toy lines, StarCom. So we already covered a number of unproduced StarCom things in a different episode, but today I wanted to take a look at the very first year of StarCom because these catalogs kind of shed new light on the subject. The first one that I received was from Italy, and this one is an LJN catalog because StarCom was distributed by LJN throughout Italy. And then the second one that I received was this one that is actually a Spanish catalog, and I really think maybe I overlooked this one a couple of times because it looks like the European insert catalog except for much larger. Except for it has that 1988 right there. But the third one that I received was this one from Coleco UK, and it doesn't look too exciting from the outside. But this is actually an embossed folder that inside holds several things. There is an advertising and promotional plan inside. There is the plan for the Rambo toy line. There's an Ubisoft, Play and Learn, Fur Skins, Wrinkles, I guess, Cabbage Patch Kids. So we're not going to look at those. We're going to look at the one that I really am eager to look at, of course, which is this one. And that is, of course, StarCom. So I'm not going to go through these pages quite in order. I would rather go through them vehicle by vehicle because the situation is that some of the vehicles appear multiple times and I kind of want to look at each of the details. It'll kind of make sense just if we get right into it. And first, I'm going to look at the battle crane. So here you can see the battle crane. It is slightly different than what was released. In most of these situations, what I tried to do is I tried to take a new picture of the finished item that is in the same rough pose as it is in the catalog so that you can have a one-on-one comparison. In this first image, you can kind of see the cutout for the guns to flip down is a lot lower down, which makes me wonder if perhaps they extended, because in one of the other images, you can kind of see that it looks like the gun tips have extended. The main gun on the battle crane does extend, if that's something maybe you've never noticed. You can tell that the canopy is shaped slightly differently, and that this is a handmade sample. The most standout feature on this one is the fact that the cargo pod is gray instead of yellow. I would imagine that they wanted to have a little bit more color pop on the finished toys, and so they added in some orange and some yellow. The other thing to look at throughout all of these examples is the decals. And I think that the ones that are StarCom specific, that you can kind of already tell that they are StarCom, like the vehicle logos and the subset and team logos, those appear to be done on paper. Same thing with some of the headlights. But the other ones look like they're actual decals. Now, StarCom toys were made by Coleco. They were designed by Coleco, but it was done with engineers at Tomy. So I kind of wondered if the Tomy engineers may have just pulled things from Tomy sets in order to create these, and we'll see more of that later. But I do suspect that as we look through these, we will find that a lot of these decals can also be found on Zoids. Next up, you can see the Harv 7 with that same cargo pod in gray. Now, it is a little bit weird that it doesn't show the fuel pod, but I will say the Harv 7 description does describe that it comes with a fuel pod. So I believe that the cargo pod is just being used temporarily. You can see on this image of the cargo pod with the Harv 7 that it actually says US Space Force on one side of the pod. That's because US Space Force was the earlier name for the entire StarCom toy line. And so there are the images of the Harv 7. Next, let's take a look at the Laser Rat. It looks like some of the handmade decals that are on it have some that didn't end up on the finished vehicle. This snake design is just not like what was on there. I really like these decals, and the one that is on the top there, I have spotted that one on some Zoids. So I do believe that if you really wanted to put some of these decals on some StarCom vehicles, that you could, well, you'd have to reproduce the handmade ones, but the other ones are something that is findable. Next, we have the StarCom Railgunner. And the Railgunner is interesting because I think that it's actually missing one of the front guns on it. and they don't extend the guns. I did decide that I would try to picture things somewhat close to the way that they had them changed, so some of them are not in full transformation here. The pictures that I've taken do not have the guns extended as they can extend, so that I can show you exactly what the two of them look like next to each other. It makes a little bit more for an apples to apples comparison if I don't extend them. Next, let's take a look at the Shadow Bat. I'm not really going in any particular order here, other than maybe the order that I took some photos. The Shadow Bat is a really great one, though, for comparison. You can see that the guns and all the blue details were originally gray. The original pictured Shadow Bat here doesn't actually have all the Magnalock spots on it. Obviously the squares all the way in the back, but also that long, almost rectangular section near the button that on the finished toy has Magnalock features, but on this does not. So one of the interesting things to me, though, is in later catalogs, they showed an additional pre-production Shadow Bat, and on that Shadow Bat, it actually had red Magnalock panels instead of blue. One of the great things to know is that the guns on top are actually from a previous existing set. You can find those in the Tomy Tomix collection, and I believe that you can actually find it also later on in Zoids. You can actually tell that there are two holes on the top of it, like posts with an opening on it, and on the finished Shadow Bat, that was changed to a hose connecting the two, so they changed the sculpt just slightly. But you can also see that those ports on top of the Harv 7. So throughout all these vehicles, you can see where Tomy was kind of recycling some of their parts in order to get the job done. And of course, we can't talk about the Shadow Bat without talking about the Shadow Parasite. And as I pointed out, that the Shadow Bat in the later catalogs had a red Magnalock panel, you can actually see that the Shadow Parasite has a red Magnalock panel on the top of it in this photo. I almost think that the red works better on this one because it blends in well with the canopy and doesn't stand out so much. But other than that, these two vehicles are remarkably similar as far as the finished vehicle and the ones that are pictured in the pre-production catalog. Something that is of note here, obviously, we can't not talk about this. The figures that are in this catalog are amazing. And you can actually kind of see that he looks like he's maybe a little bit too tall. I would also say in this picture, it looks like his hips aren't fully bent. That may be because of the length of his legs being just a bit too long to fit inside the vehicles. But certainly it's just a ground up different design. Okay, the Shadow Raider. Now the Shadow Raider also has a picture of that same robot drone. And it is also missing some of the color pop, namely the yellow. All of the yellow in this situation is black, but I also noticed that one of the things that it is missing at this stage is the secondary wheels that kind of hide behind those treads, the area that the treads attach to. You can kind of see that there's no additional wheel sticking out closer to the body of the vehicle. So I'm guessing that with the treads off of there, this didn't roll very much, or with the treads on, it may have had trouble rolling and needed a little bit more assistance in doing that. And again, whenever you see these robot drones inside a vehicle, you will not see them in this catalog with the canopy shut because they just cannot fit. Now let's take a look at the Star Wolf. The Star Wolf, of course, is a fun one. For me, the thing that just blows my mind is there's all these pre-production details on this, but we don't see a Star Wolf yet with those wings that are up in the back. And that's because those additional wings actually appeared several times throughout different media. I would say that the biggest difference you can spot here in the Star Wolf are these wildly different decals. And if they look weird to you, they probably should, because they're not actually decals. What they did is they took a picture of the vehicle and they painted these in afterward. Because if you look earlier in the catalog, you could see the same photo and you could see that it doesn't actually have any of the decals on it. And in other photos throughout here, there are no decals. Now let's go back and we'll take a look at the Shadow Invader. The Shadow Invader is probably my favorite one in the catalog for the purpose of looking at these robots. That's why I saved it for last. Not only does it have the great images of the robot that is driving, but you can actually see that there was more than one model for the robot because they're both on there together. And the interesting thing about this drone in particular is that this isn't the only place that images of it can be found. Strangely, it seems that some of these images ended up being the basis of some line art that was in this StarCom coloring book by World. And you can clearly see in the image here that the robot drone pictured is not one of the produced robot drones, but instead it is one of the robot drones that was pre-production from this catalog. And that brings me to Starbase headquarters. The thing that sticks out to me the most is probably the fact that there's that cargo pod next to it that is gray, and you can clearly see the Magnalock panel on that actually has text on it, which is very different for a Magnalock panel. Sorry, with some of these vehicles, I don't have the stickers in the right place, and for Starbase headquarters, I do have a decal sheet. I didn't want to put it on, but here you can see the picture that was most definitely used in the World coloring book. And then some other comparisons. It even looks like this character walking down these stairs may have had an Astro Marines logo on his chest that is probably just worn off. Looking at these figures as well, there is an image of the finished Starmax bomber and the figures sitting in the personnel pod, and they just don't fit. You can't fit one of these figures in there. Lastly, I want to mention that in the front of the catalog, they're just kind of giving an overview of what the features are of the toy line, and they mention Magnalock and are demonstrating what Magnalock does, and there is one panel that does show just a tiny bit of Starbase Station. So if you can find any of those other details, like I was saying, with all of the Tomy parts that were reused, and I'm really hoping some Zoids fans out there recognize some of these decals and can just point me to what kits they may be in, because it sure would be fun to put some of those on a spare StarCom vehicle. Like, share, and subscribe, all that good stuff. I really appreciate the feedback. Leave some comments. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode of Articulated Points. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'd appreciate it if you would like, share, and subscribe. If you'd like to learn more about some of the toys featured in this episode or want to follow us on social media, links are in the description below this video.